This week, we're talking about words of power, why we let our kids cuss, and you should too. Let's fucking go. Welcome to the Derek's Live, the podcast for badass parents. I want to welcome all the badass moms and dads who are listening out there. My name is Sean. I'm here with my beautiful wife and co-host, Emily. Hey, Emily. How you doing?
I am present.
Present. Got to get a little bit of head banging in before bedtime tonight. It's been a good week.
It's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday. It's not Friday yet. Oh, man. Well, we got 3 more days left to fucking crush it, though. So
Absolutely.
There's more days to win than there is to lose, and that's all that's important.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. So we've had a great week this week. We're looking at another hurricane / tropical storm / Florida afternoon thunderstorm. I don't know. I say that we don't get a big effect as far inland as we are, but there are people who are going to have some pain from this thing. So not to discredit that, but we don't know what's happening.
Yeah, with any storm ever. Like, you don't know until it's hitting that's where it's going to hit. So
fun stuff. Election night.
Yep.
So hope you went and voted today. However you voted. We're very political people, but this is not the place for that. I don't think. Maybe it is. Do you guys like politics? Who wants? If you like politics, let us know in the comments. I don't know. Everybody keeps asking me to talk about politics, but I'm like, no, you don't really want to hear what I have to say. You want to hear what you want to think, or you want me to say what
I just get so heated. I think
Yeah.
most of it is to keep me calm. So we're not unhappy with the way our state went.
Not unhappy with the way that our state went tonight. Things are going good here in the Sunshine State. I haven't looked at local elections yet, which is really, really important.
Yeah, and
so that's the scary part, because we live in a very contradictory county.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that. All right.
Words of power.
Words of fucking power. So this one's gonna have a lot of the dirty stuff in it. So we're gonna try no more than usual, I suppose. But
we're not going out of our way.
No. So but people have asked us about this so much. This is the one question that we get a lot.
Yeah. And
so people keep saying, well, why are you cussing? When did this start? Why do your kids cuss? Mm-hmm. Or why are you okay with your kids cussing? It's a hot topic in the Derek household. Our family hates it, like despises it. If you're listening to this, Mom, I'm sorry. I really do love you. But it is what it is. I mean, it isn't. It's powerful.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of reasoning and a lot of thought that has went into this for us. We've had a lot of discussion about it.
Well, and it dates back prior to podcasting.
Yeah,
it dates
way
back prior to even having little children and big children. Like, we've kind of had to adjust our standpoint on some things because we kind of did things just for the sake of doing things and not really understanding why.
Yeah, well, I think like it's kind of, if you think about it, it's a product of our school system to start with.
Oh, very much so.
But we're taught from a very young age that we have to conform to this standard and this norm. All the meanwhile, everybody is living in these deep, dark places in their private time that are very contradictory to what they are on the surface a lot of times. And that's not to call anybody out. That's just
Oh, well, it's everybody.
It's everybody. It's not just
We're not
one person.
If you feel like we're singling you out, just realize that it's not you. It's everybody. You are not alone in your in your darkness.
No, I love Tim Grover calls it the dark side. Like everybody's got this dark side that they tuck away and they hide and they thrive on it sometimes. But it's this really weird standard that we have in society that you're not supposed to cuss.
Well, and I think we hold our children much higher to it than we even hold ourselves to.
Oh, yeah. Your teacher ingrained it in you.
Yeah.
Your parents ingrained it in you.
I know that we struggled with it with our she's now 7, but when she was in kindergarten, that was a big sore subject because her teacher did not like it.
Mrs. C calling like 2 or 3 times a week. And I'm like, listen, like, it's just not like, call me. Did she hurt somebody?
Yeah, no.
No. She didn't hurt anybody. Call me when something's like impacted. You've got a kid in your class dressed like a Furby. I'm not telling you, like my kid can cuss if she wants to cuss. So,
and she did it in context. Like we're proud of her.
So, but Emily, I think like if you're like most kids, when you grow up and there's this standard that in the spotlight when we're in class and all the grownups are around, everybody's like no cussing. Yeah. But the minute the grownups are gone when you're a kid, it's like a fucking free for all.
It was different for us because we were homeschooled.
Okay.
So if we didn't get a lot of that like lack of grown up time that was like our friends, but like in our household, I think that especially my brother and I early on, like we came to this understanding, like, listen, you and I can cuss, but nobody else can hear us cuss because there was this hot sauce. And so when we got caught using a select, verbiage in the household that mom or dad could hear, we got a couple of drops of this scorned woman hot sauce, and that you didn't want to mess with that stuff. So, but I think you're right. Like if there wasn't anybody around to hear, it was a free for all. And, my little brother, had a little friend that lived out back, and their favorite thing to do, I think, was just scream cuss words off the dock in the backyard while they fished. Like, how long can we make it echo?
Like, how loud can the word shit reverberate through nature? And,
I think there's just something absolutely hysterical if you're under the age of 10 about any word that has to do with a bodily function.
Like, did you ever play the penis game when you were a kid? And like one person would whisper penis and the next person would have to say it louder. And the next person a little bit louder. Before you know it, like some dickhead was like just yelling penis at the top of his lungs. But like words have a lot of power, right? And so I think as a child or as a kid, you almost feel like this power that's addressed just because it's a taboo. Yeah. And just because we make it a taboo, even most of the time understanding why it's a taboo. Yeah. And so we have all these preconceived notions about cussing simply because of the way that a grown-up felt about it when we were kids. Yeah. And so it's really this crazy thing. And I know one of the things for me is people have asked, well, like you used to be a preacher, you used to preach on Sundays, and now you're this totally different person.
And the reality is
that it's really not like I'm still me. The reality is that like even when I was preaching, I had to be purposeful not to use like foul language on the stage. And a lot of times I failed that. Like I dropped, like I'd say shit and bitch, and like it wasn't common, but there were times that it slipped. Yeah. Because in my head, when I'm verbalizing the speech in my head, it just sounds that way.
Well, and you emphasize certain things, like you want to catch somebody's attention, you want to draw them back in, and that does that.
Well, it's a gravitational, like they have, there's a lot of power in a lot of the words that you use, and there's emotions that are tied to it, and you can pull those out of people when you're speaking. There's a lot of psychology behind it. Yeah. But I say that to say that like I really, in being my authentic self, have abandoned the need to cater to that to people. And that's really what it's about, is just being yourself at the end of the day. And listen, like we talked about this earlier. There's not really we're not motivating people to go out and find a reason to cuss.
Yeah.
Like if that's not who you are, that's okay.
Yeah. We're not asking you to change yourself.
No, don't go change just because. And listen, there is actually some science, and we're going to talk about that here shortly, that supports reasons you should cuss. But if that's contradictory to who you are at your core, that's okay.
Yeah.
We're not asking you to be anything that you're not. We just want you not to judge. I really don't even care if you judge us. We want you to understand the why.
Right.
And you can take or do with it whatever you want.
Well, and I think that knowledge is power. And that a lot of times we have these preconceived notions that we believe certain things. And like I've said, we've kind of had to adjust how we parent, because when we stood back and looked at, okay, why are we doing the things that we're doing? The logic and like the actual data didn't match up with what we were teaching.
Yeah.
And so it took us kind of stepping back and being like, hey, you know what? We're wrong. Let's fix this. And so I think that as a culture, and you know what we want to at least express with with you guys, is that sometimes you have to kind of look outside the box and you have to look for answers. You can't just believe something because somebody said so. You have to kind of look at all of the different answers and then kind of come to a conclusion on your own. But that in all of that, there isn't judgment for somebody else along the way. Like just because you believe one way doesn't mean that that's right or wrong. That might be the right thing for your family, but you don't know where someone else is at.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that we all have this ability to do what's right for ourselves.
Yeah.
And what's right for the Derrick family might not be right for the Smith family or the Joneses. And that's okay. But just because you have this preconceived notion doesn't mean that we're wrong.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you're wrong.
Right.
It just means that we have different perspectives. And sometimes sharing those perspectives with one another allows you to come together and form a new perspective that's maybe a little bit closer to the center. I think if we could all do a little bit of that, our country would be in a lot better fucking place. Not to get too political, but...
No, but I think that that's exactly right. That, you know, just having a conversation instead of just shutting someone out, having that conversation and expressing your why makes all the difference.
So much respect to the few people who have asked us this and asked us to explain it, and not just had these shutdowns and preconceived notions. Like we got family that won't even listen to the podcast or hit the like button on a comment because of the way that we talk. And they won't support this simply because of that. And thank you for hanging on and being able to see past that and being able to engage in some conversation. It means a lot, for sure. Like a whole bunch.
Yeah.
No joke.
So, and one of the things that we've kind of come to understand in all of this, that in using our language in the way that we use it, it really allows us to become the most authentic, most honest version of ourselves. And that was one of the driving forces in having this conversation, especially, I mean, we even talked about, you know, is this something that we want to broach on our podcast? Is it something that we want to broach at all? And we realized that it really is important. Like this is a conversation that a culture we really need to understand and have, and at least have the information so we can make a decision.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, this is something, the authentic part of this is really a big part of it for us. We're going to get into the foundational of the why, but the root of it is just being ourselves. And it comes at a cost. Honestly, it does. And we're okay with that. I was doing some research on statistics, and like when your podcast is marketed as explicit, which we have to be because of our language, it drops your advertising ability by like 80%.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, if we ever think that we're going to be able to support ourselves with this, that's an impact, right?
Right.
But the reality is that we're not going to not be true to who we are. I don't care what it costs us. Like, I don't ever want a fucking advertiser on here that's going to dictate or say what we could or couldn't say. And I'm willing to pay that cost.
Right.
So I think that at the end of the day, there's a lot of opinions about the subject, but not everybody's right. Not everybody's wrong. There's a middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if we can broach some of that stuff. So let's dig in.
So I think one of the harder questions is, why does it bother you?
Oh, for sure. And I think that's at the root of the conversation. Like, why does it, like, when someone says, like, fuck, why is there this thing in you that it tugs at?
And I think you need to look kind of personal at your own story. But for a lot of us, especially at least in our circle now, a lot of that stems from growing up in church or being exposed to that lifestyle in a church where it wasn't even just language. It was everything you did. You had to wear the right clothes. You had to say the right things. You had to, sit still and sit upright. And oh my gosh, if God forbid a cuss word slipped out of your mouth, like the whole church would shut down.
Well, I think a lot of it's, you talked about this, and as we were studying the Puritan culture, and it's really an American foundational thing, that a lot of our belief system is based on a Puritan culture. And I think we're moving further and further away from that, which, you have opinions about, but there's these things that we've construed and kind of poked at and made fit an agenda that's not always like a biblical agenda. And so we have a lot of those foundational things in church simply because there was somebody in the lineage of religion that said, hey, this is how I want this to be viewed.
Right. And so there are several scriptures out there that people have kind of used to defend using foul language. But when you look down at the root of them and when you actually read them in the context that they're written, it doesn't ever, first off, it doesn't ever specify a word or a set of words because, one, they didn't speak English, and two, the words that we use now that we consider foul language weren't foul 100 years ago.
Most of them didn't even exist in biblical times.
No. So, there's no way to even correlate the two in most circumstances.
Well, and I think one of the scriptures we hear quoted a lot is Ephesians 4:29, and in the New Living it says, "Don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be encouragement to those who hear them."
So, and this is my favorite saying in the whole wide world. It's not what you say; it's how you say it. It's what you mean when you say it. So if I said, oh my God, that's fucking amazing, that's encouraging, right? I'm not tearing anybody down by the words that I said. But if I called you, oh my gosh, you're the absolute epitome of a donkey's bottom. I didn't say a foul word, but
that was a lot worse than what you fucking said to me the first time, you bitch.
It's what you mean.
Yeah.
It's not what you say. The words themselves really are just words. It's how you use them that gives them the power that they have.
Well, and I think you don't get to cherry pick either, right? Like you don't get to decide that, oh, this word is not good, but this word's a gray area, so it's okay.
Yeah. Well, and our favorite thing in church, oh, fudge, or oh, sugar muffin, or
you make up some bullshit phrase or substitute to justify your thought, and there's no difference. And basically the root of that scripture, what that verse is saying is that you should be building things up and not tearing things down, right? And I don't know about you, but there's a lot of shit that's said to people that tears them down in church and in life, not just in a religious aspect. So your idea is that, hey, this is not okay because of this scripture. Well, what you said about Sister Betty ain't okay either.
Right.
It's the same fucking thing.
Right.
And so you don't get to say one doesn't work for you and the other one's okay.
So, and that's hard, right? We don't typically like to have that condemnation and recognizing where our weaknesses are. But it really is. I think that in a lot of our life, we cherry pick what we like and what we don't like to fit who we think people want us to be. And the reality is you're making this facade, and all you're doing is tearing yourself down in the process. And most of the people that are like looking for this person really don't care about you. But when somebody truly sees who you are, it doesn't matter the language that you use, or if you're wearing sweatpants or jeans or a 3-piece suit, they see you and all of the authentic that is you. But the moment that you try and start covering all of that up, you're not ever allowing anybody to come in close enough to get to know the real you. And so not only are you missing out, but all of the people in your life are missing out on the value that you bring to an environment.
Yeah. Well, and so there's this dilution that goes on, right? Because you're not really who you're pretending to be. And the reality is that everybody else that you're around that's pretending not to cuss, they fucking cuss. Like, it's not, they're I would say that 70% of the people in the world are closet cussers, and the other 30% are closet fake cussers. So, like, I have heard some amazing men of God drop the F-bomb, right? And most of them would never do it from stage, but I have heard some amazing men of God say some pretty shitty things to their fucking wives behind closed doors too.
Yeah.
There's no difference. There's no difference. And so I think that scripturally and contextually, if you really look at all of the scripture, the root of that is we should be building people and not tearing people down. Yeah. And so what we teach our children is that you don't get to use words, cuss words or regular words to hurt people, right? You don't get to say, hey, you're fucking stupid, or hey, you're stupid, or hey, you're not very intelligent. They're all the same thing. There's no difference.
And side note, we don't even let them say that about themselves.
Or themselves.
Like, what they say has power. And any version of that sentence is still not okay. We build up, we don't tear down. And that's the value that we're instilling in our children, all of our children, and each other.
Absolutely. And so, like, at the end of the day, their words move them forward or take them back. And teaching them and teaching yourself that the things you say have consequence. And knowing there's a time and a place is important too. Like, when you're, in the middle of, I don't know, give me an example, but there's a time and a place.
Well, I think you need to know your audience and your environment. Yeah. And just because you say certain things in one setting doesn't mean that you're changing who you are. But like, if I were going for an interview, I might not talk the same as I would to my 5-year-old sitting on the couch.
Sure.
So, and cussing or not cussing, it's still not the same language. I would use everything is different because my audience is different. And so recognizing where you're at and who you're talking to, I think also adds value to what you're actually saying. So recognizing where you're at, but then in the same context, but don't lose yourself in it. If you have to break yourself to fit some mold, you're probably not where you're supposed to be.
That's good shit.
So, I mean, and that's hard because a lot of us want so desperately to fit in. You want to be the girls that wear pink on Wednesdays, right? Or the football jock that has the letter on his jacket. You want to be the group that fits the mold. But the reality is, if you're breaking yourself so much that you can't look in the mirror and recognize who you're looking at, you've gone too far. Yeah. So it's more than just fitting a situation for a moment. You're breaking off your identity. And that's where you have to draw the line.
So, and scientifically, there's a lot of studies that support cussing.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of studies.
Yeah. So
every single study that's ever been done to see if cussing gives you an advantage in life supports cussing.
And a lot of them started off to kind of prove the opposite, right? They wanted to show.
Yep.
Because, I mean, how many times have you heard out there that if you cuss that you're unintelligent because you can't think of a better use of words?
I was thinking about, as we were talking about this, is you remember Will Smith when he started rapping, like, as atrocious as it was, about, and he would never cuss.
That's right.
Because grandma, and he'd always say that grandma or mom told him that, like, smart people don't have to use cuss words. And 25 years later, that motherfucker's slapping people on stage. The irony in that. Yeah, grandma should told you to keep your goddamn hands to yourself too. But like, I just don't. Anyway, I digress.
So, but we dare you, if you're interested in this at all, please go look. This is not stuff that we've really had to like dig for. This is very common knowledge, especially in the neuroscientific community. But if you Google like science of cussing or like just cussing and science or data studies, like there are umpteen 100,000, like there's
a Harvard study.
Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford, like there's some like several schools in New Jersey, Massachusetts, and then abroad all over. So they're actually studying it cross-culturally so they can understand how foul language actually goes across language barriers. So like so much so that they actually studied monkeys that learned sign language and then self-taught their sign language. They actually watched these monkeys associate foul and like potty language because they taught the monkeys to go to the bathroom. But then they actually like the monkeys and the trainers realized that certain words were taboo. Well, those monkeys later on had babies and taught the babies that those words were taboo, and they used them emotionally, not just physically. Like this, it wasn't just potty. Crazy. They were teaching their young that like, oh, that's potty language. And the mommy apes were actually teaching the baby apes the difference between emotional.
So they were passing on. That's really crazy.
Physical traits of potty language.
That's really cool.
So
sorry,
like, no, I'm a nerd.
Emily loves I've
been studying data for weeks.
Anytime I need to know something about a subject, I'm like, hey, can you do some research? And Emily will get you the best fucking research there is. So,
I love numbers. Give me data.
My favorite though is the Kiel University study about pain tolerance.
Yeah.
So they did this study, and in the study they found that only traditional swear words, when used during moments of pain, actually increase the pain tolerance of an individual. So how did they do this study, Emily?
So this was really cool, and this is one you can actually do at home. But the level of swear word actually increased the tolerance of pain. And so what they did was they filled buckets with ice water, and if you picked a descriptive adjective word. So something that you would use to describe a table. So brown, tall, flat, or a cuss word. And so they chose a list from 3 cuss words that they ranked as the top. And I think they were fuck, shit, and I want to say damn it, but I don't think that was
so
right.
They had like a placebo word and an actual cuss word.
And then they did it once with no word, and then once with the placebo word, and then once with the actual cuss word. And the studies like jumped from, so like without anything or with the flat word, it was basically the same. They were around a minute, between a minute and a half, depending on male or female.
And what were they had to do? What did they have to do?
They had to keep their hand buried in the ice water.
In the ice water, okay.
So for most people, it was about a minute to a minute and a half. So women usually last about a minute, and males lasted a little bit longer, anywhere between a minute and 15 and a minute and 30. So then they took it out, and then they reset. And then they could use one of the 3 words, and they could scream it, yell it, or talk it over and over repeatedly. And they actually almost tripled their score. So most of them were reaching 2.5 to 3
just by cussing.
Cussing in one word, not repeated words, not like a sentence, just one word. And they duplicated that study in the Kiel University, which is in the UK, but then they brought it over to the US and they did the same study, and the results were almost identical.
Well, and then they did one about physical strength too.
Right. So this same university, Kiel, actually every year they do there's a professor there that this is his research
data. He's got like a fascination with the word fuck or something, and he's like,
whatever it is.
I can use it.
Well, but he has surrounded himself with all of these research students that are now progressing his studies. And so each year they have this, just an immense amount of data that they collect about the science of cussing. And so the following year, after the ice bucket, they did a strength challenge. And so they did this thing where you actually held yourself up on the arms of your chair.
Mm-hmm.
And the same idea. So you have a placebo word and then the cuss word. And your strength actually increased by yelling or screaming a cuss word versus yelling or screaming a placebo word. And it didn't matter what the placebo word was. And even like, this is kind of crazy to me, because like, even like the powerful, like the I am statements, I am strong, I can do this, that didn't have as much of an effect as just a single cuss word repeated over and over again.
So not only does it give you a mental edge in having a higher pain tolerance, but it literally gives you a physical edge in the amount of strength you can exert.
Yeah.
So that's pretty astonishing, that a word, and it really speaks, I think, to the power of the mind.
Yeah.
And so why do you think that is? Like,
well, statistically, data. Foul language actually sits in a different part of the brain than our verbal language that we use. And so if you've ever studied somebody that lost their language because of a stroke, there's some really cool studies out there that talk about people that learned to talk again because they started to sing and they could sing their sentences. Well, because singing is in a different part of the brain than talking. And even though there's still a verbal connection, it's left hemisphere versus right hemisphere. And so when we cuss, we actually use a separate part of the brain that's more emotional. It's more primal. It's part of that, the amygdala. So that part of the brain that's really dates back before we were human.
the Neanderthal genes.
Yeah. So if you have that Neanderthal DNA, if you ever did your, 23andMe, and
I got some Neanderthal.
So that amygdala, that part of the brain that is more primal, that's where that language sits. And so there is actually, it hits our body differently because it uses a different part of the brain.
So I know one study almost equated it to, or compared it to, like a roar. And it's very much like it's the same part of the brain in an animal that in a human that a roar originates from, that when we cuss, it activates that same area of the brain.
Right.
And so it really emits a lot of emotion and character in our body language and everything.
So, and it's kind of interesting because one of the studies actually brings up, like, it's our almost innate reaction to cuss. Like if you ever stub your toe in the middle of the night.
Oh, damn it.
Like your innate response is a cuss word. Like, because there is a part of our brain that knows that somehow, some way, that helps.
Yeah.
We don't scream, oh, chocolate muffins. We scream, God damn it. And even your 2-year-old, without any sense of anything, does the same thing, because there is something primal about, these words of power. They really do make a difference. And when you use them properly, it really does change how and what you do and how you say it. So it's something really interesting, and they're still doing studies. It's still very much a taboo, so it doesn't hit the front page as much as it probably should.
Yeah. Well, I think it's becoming much more mainstream, and
I think the data is helping.
And I think what we see is when you look at people who are highly successful in life, the numbers overwhelmingly point to the fact that they cuss in large percentages. And I think that really goes back to that successful people are authentic people,
Right.
And authentic people don't give a fuck what you think about them.
Yeah.
And so it's really more than just cussing. I think cussing is part of it, but it really comes back down to just being true to yourself, and not compromising because somebody doesn't like it. So,
and that's, for us, it's interesting because we homeschool, so we don't have this outside influence that says every day you're not allowed to cuss these, you're not allowed to use that language.
Mm-hmm.
So it really, there are days that nobody cusses, but there are days that everybody cusses. And we are very mindful to use it in a way that encourages and builds up, or is funny, but not in a way that tears down.
Yeah.
So, and there is actually another study that actually talks about the health benefits and the psychological benefits for like your mental psyche and even like your physical health, like cancer patients, we're using cussing as a way to basically vent, and it was like an antidepressant. And so it helps heal the mind from the outer things that are going on. And so when we're raising our children, we're trying to be very cognizant of the, like, listen, there's not things that you can't do. Everything is there for you to do, but you have to learn how to use what you have as a skill to encourage yourself and to encourage everybody around you. And when you hear a 5-year-old scream at her sister, that was fucking amazing, your first reaction is, oh my God, go to timeout. And you're like, no, that was fucking amazing. I'm so proud of you. Because she was so excited to see her sister succeed at something that the language it meant more. Like, it wasn't just amazing. It was fucking amazing. And she was able to express
it gives it a different
that
connotation, doesn't it? Like it gives it something extra that it didn't have before. But going back to, you were talking about people using cuss words, and I just had a brain fart of where I was even going with that comment. But it's really, I think it at the end of the day, it all goes back to authenticity.
Yeah.
Right? Because you were talking about the mental benefits of it, and how, like, if you look at the studies, a lot of the studies show trends in depression and how mental health is tied to people who cuss. Like people who cuss more tend to be less depressed.
Correct.
And so, but I think that, again,
the
goes
correlation
back to,
isn't necessarily to cussing, but it's being authentic. It's
right?
about being real.
Because if you're real and you genuinely don't give a fuck what someone thinks about what you say, then you tend to be a little more emotionally healthy, mentally healthy. But there's a lot of really cool studies that tend to show that people who are more trustworthy and more honest cuss more too.
Actually, that was a really interesting study, because it was a large number, like 80% showed that in their trustworthiness, that when you use curse words in a specific way, that it increased your trustworthiness and your honesty in such a way that it, like, even like political speeches, that there were certain things that if you used a cuss word in the right way, it made it seem that much more powerful. Like, oh my God, that person really is that trustworthy.
Well, and like you'll hear there's a lot of presidents will even drop like a damn it, or, something like that in a speech. And there's an emotional tie there for people when they're listening.
Well, and that's intentional. You have to know that if it makes it to a presidential speech, 99% of the time it was planned, and it's planned because they know the power that it holds, and it draws your attention. Because if your brain is falling off, one word like that will pull you back in like instantly. So, but a study that we actually looked at that was kind of alarming, just because it kind of went the other way. There is such a powerful healing that comes in using language that makes you feel better. And so when you're sick, or when you're dealing with emotional health issues, it's not uncommon to cuss a little more. And it goes back to that innate ability to, your body just kind of knows what it needs. But sometimes everybody else around you kind of misses it. And so if you've ever been around a moody teenager, and all of a sudden they start dropping a couple more cuss words, dropping the F-bomb, and being like really moody and saying things out of character, the parent in us, especially the parent that's trying to keep all of the ducks in a row, right? All we see is, why are you using this foul language? You're so terrible. Go to your room. Consequence, punishment. This is not how I raised you.
Yeah.
And the reality is, what's going on psychologically, that language is actually really a cry for help.
It's a tie to emotion.
Right. And so what's going on is there's all of these new emotions, and the brain is trying to make sense of it. So the words are actually trying to help that individual really make sense of where they're at.
Well, I think, you ever think about, like, if you ever worked out and you get into a cadence in your workout, and there's a physical energy that gets emitted that it's very therapeutic
Mm-hmm.
when you're dealing with, like, if you're ever like trying to clear your head and you're just mentally or even emotionally just fucked, and you get into the gym and you start picking up something heavy, there's a pain that your body feels in those moments, and you get in a cadence and a rep, and you can push because of the emotion that's tied to that.
Mm-hmm.
And our words are the same way.
Right.
It's what you're talking about is very much the verbal and emotional equivalent of that workout cadence that you get in when you're on a bike or you're on the jog or you're lifting.
So this book that we're reading, or I'm going to mispronounce her name, Emma Barn, I think, Byrne, and the book is called Swearing is Good for You. And she's a data analyst, neuroscientist.
Mm-hmm.
And so all she does is she collects data and makes sense of it, and then she writes books. But she was doing this study on how cursing and cussing was helping cancer patients. And what she found was, specifically with women, that when a woman was cussing because she had cancer, and so she would cuss about her cancer, this fucking sucks, or even just language that was not harmful, like, how do we get this shit done? It wasn't aimed at a person. It wasn't even really aimed at her cancer. It was just language. What they found was, in women more so than men, is that a lot of those women actually lost friends and lost communication because they were cussing more during their bouts with cancer.
Wow.
And what she said was, and it kind of just stopped me, there are circumstances that swearing might help a person who is coping with something that is really painful, both emotionally and physically. If you hear swearing, don't pull away. And so it reminded me of having teenagers in the house.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, out of nowhere, everybody just starts cussing, like, whoa, what is going on here? I'm like, we weren't cussing yesterday. Now everybody's cussing today. What's going on? And there really is an emotional tie to it. And so as a parent, as a friend, as somebody who wants to help other people, if you hear someone start cussing, probably more than they used to, have the opportunity to have a conversation. Don't just pull away because you don't like that or you don't like that type of language. There's probably something else going on that you pulling away would only exasperate.
Well, especially if it's out of character for that person,
Correct.
right? Like if you're around somebody that's just who they are, that's less alarming, right? But if you're around somebody that's out of character for them, then that's when this applies.
Right.
So looking at that focus, Emily, like, you mentioned that, like, we were with our kids, we were kind of like shocked when that started happening, and it revealed that there was some emotion going on.
Right.
So if you can guess, like, our thought process on this has changed. This isn't how
Very
we've
much
always
so.
felt.
Right.
And we have a very unique situation. We have 6 children, if you don't know. And so we have 3 older children who we adopted in their teenagers, and then we have 3 younger children who are still at home. And so of the older children, it's really like having 2 different families.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's kind of weird. And our kids would tell you the same thing, that, like, we've got this big family has very different upbringings.
Yeah.
And I think our older kids are kind of jealous sometimes. Like, oh, you guys don't know how
They
easy you
changed
have
the
it.
rules.
So, but we didn't have this viewpoint with our older kids. It was very taboo, and we were like, no, because we were fighting this stigma that we were trying to live up to ourselves.
Right.
And that's shifted with our children now. So we get this question a lot. Like we had someone ask the other day, like, hey, why do you talk like this? Don't you want your children to not, like, to be respectful and to talk like society talks? And my answer was like, no, that's not what I want at all. I want them to be themselves.
Right.
Like, they don't have to talk like me, but I want them to be themselves. And I suppose that we're products of our parents, so they're probably going to talk like us.
Except, are we? I mean, well, I would say language-wise, especially.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have the ability to decide who we want to be, but I think largely in part we even if we don't want to admit it, we draw a lot of fucking character traits from mom and dad.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have the ability to change those things as we form our own opinions and have our own viewpoints on the world, but at the root of our personalities, I think we can see a lot of our parents. And so I believe our kids cuss now. So I think that will probably be something that they carry into adulthood. And proudly so. Like, I'm not ashamed of that.
No.
You're mistaken if that's what you think I should feel, or we should feel. But so, Emily, what do you think was like the catalyst for that?
Well, I mean, again, for me, it's data, right?
Yeah.
If there is a tool out there, regardless of what the tool is, if there's a tool that gives our children an edge, it gives them a little bit of extra strength, it gives them a little bit of extra mental power, it gives them anything that's an edge above anybody else, I want to train them to use that tool properly. And so for this language especially, I want them to use words of power. I want them to be able to build things up and not tear them down. And that takes time and training, because I think our inner being, we really want to tear things down. Like the little kid that stomps on the blocks, like our innate sense is, no, we need to break that. And so as parents, it takes a lot of training and a lot of shaping and molding in a calm way, that it's not the end of the world if you slip up, but we need to recognize that these words do have power, and you have to use them like a superpower and not a supervillain.
Right. Because you can use them horribly. Like, you can really misuse your language, and it doesn't just end with 4-letter words. Right. There are things in your life that people have said to you that you remember because they fucking hurt. Right. And there wasn't always a 4-letter word tied to those things. Probably most of the time, there wasn't a 4-letter word tied to those things. So what you say matters. And so our focus with our children is not, hey, don't say this word because other people have an idea about it. Say what you feel. However, you don't get to hurt people with what you say. Yeah. And so, like we talked about earlier, we're very, very purposeful to say, hey, we're not going to say that about that person, or we're not going to say that about ourselves. You're not allowed to talk like that. You can't think like that. And controlling that is what's important. Them understanding that, hey, what I say can change the world. And if I'm going to add value, I need to build, not break.
So, and it really does start at home. So find those values for your family, whatever they are. And you don't have to agree with us. We just want to expose you to the data that we have and the experience that we've learned over the years. Like Sean said, we have a very unique perspective on this because we did the teenage years first and we started over at birth. Most people don't get a chance to see that perspective. And we raised 3 teenagers from like 11, 12 up into adulthood and then started over with babies. So we do have a very unique perspective, and we didn't get it right.
Well, and I think on top of that, a lot of our ministry focus in the years we spent in ministry was in student ministry with kids from elementary all the way through high school. Yeah. And so we've really had the pleasure of parenting hundreds of children in a loose capacity. Yeah. So we've got a really unique perspective on some of these things. And listen, like, you cuss. You just don't want to admit it, but you cuss. You're lying to the world if you say you don't. And you probably don't like it when you cuss. It probably makes you feel like you got to go pray and ask for forgiveness. But you do it. Everybody does. Like I said, I have heard amazing men of God drop an F-bomb. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But does a word make you imperfect? And I don't believe that it does. I don't believe that there's a foundation for that anywhere in the Word of God. And so at the end of the day, we're adding and we're not taking away. Yeah. And that's what's important to us.
And that's the value that we're instilling in our children. So if you're joining us now, we would love to invite you back to listen to our family non-negotiables, because we talk a little bit about this idea of building value. Mm-hmm. And we break down our family non-negotiables. And this was kind of a bonus episode on that. This is an extra value. It's not part of our non-negotiables that's on our wall, but it's something that's instilled in our children, in our family, and in ourselves, that we really live out every day. And it is very apparent because we do get this question a lot, and not just from the podcast, but like even at the playground. Like, this is just, we are who you see here is really who we are. This is
all the time.
And it's crazy and it's chaos and it's funny, probably way more than it should be. But we are who we are. This is it. What you see is what you get. And if you were to catch us at the playground, it would be very much the same interaction most of the time.
Yeah.
But in saying that, if you're just joining us now, please go back and listen to those non-negotiables. They really form the foundation of who we are and where we stand. And we invite you to kind of learn with us as we go and follow us on this journey.
Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to be better parents than we were yesterday. That's all we're trying to be. Yeah. Our kids deserve to have the best parents we can be for them. And that's what this is about. And so we are encouraged that you're here. We thank you for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. Do us a favor and hit a 5-star review for us. When you start getting those reviews, it pushes you up in the rankings and you get more people that are showing, or it shows more people the podcast. You get more listens and it really helps us. So we also got a new website that's up. You can visit the brand new website at www.thederrickslive.com. Make sure you check out the swag store. We got some cool merch on there. Get your Derek's Live t-shirts, your badass parents, and badass in the making for your kids. We order shirts for all the kids. And then your Jesus fucking loves you shirts and coffee cups are on there too. So sport those at the office and take pictures. I'll do this. If anybody, the first person that sends me a picture of their Jesus fucking loves you coffee cup at work, I'll send you a free t-shirt. All right. So if you're listening to this, order your coffee cup and then send me a picture while you're at work. I'll order you any t-shirt you want off the website and send it to you. So. First person, and I'll announce it on the Facebook page.
So the website again is thederrickslive.com. You can actually go there to find all the podcast episodes as well. So if you need help finding us on any of the platforms, there's a link there to find us there. So we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Google, all the places, and YouTube. So you can still watch us on YouTube if that's your thing. And we're so thankful that you're following along with us and on this journey and just here for the ride. Yeah.
So guys, thanks for getting through this one. If you have any questions about this, you can hit us up at thederrickslive@gmail.com. Get in the inbox and let us know. And thanks for being here. Remember that Jesus fucking loves you.
Also, don't forget about the voicemail. You can still call in and leave how the non-negotiables are affecting your life at home on the Derek's Live voicemail. I'm trying to pull the number up real quick. Do you have it handy?
Mm-mm.
Hold on. Sorry.
You're so unprepared. You're going to bring it up and then not have it. So sorry. You're killing me. So we got to, Emily gets a strike for this one. Okay. You're going to get a spanking later.
Okay, so voicemail 352-327-8046, and you can call in and leave how the non-negotiables are affecting your life, and we'll play it on the air. So, Jesus fucking loves you.
Fuck your excuses. Have a good night, guys.